Hello everyone and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 5.02 and in this lesson we're going to talk about a few different freeware plugins that are available for both Mac and PC that I might consider using here inside of section 5 when we get to our creation based projects. It's no guarantee I'm going to use them, and chances are I probably won't, but there are certain times when I just want to add a certain bit of character to my sounds that with the built-in stuff either I can't do or is very, very difficult to achieve. So for example, let's say we want to add in compression here. Okay, let's take a listen to the sound. And what I'm going to do is drop an FX chain on here. And so I'm going to start by adding in the actual compression. Let's do that first. You can do this in kind of any order you want. So I'm going to add the compressor. Okay, just something slight, nothing super, super heavy. But every time I drop this compressor in, it's going to sound like the Bitwig compressor. Every time I drop the dynamics effect in here, it's going to sound like the Bitwig dynamics effect. And that can get a little old, that can get a little bit dry, that can get a little bit boring. So what I oftentimes like to do is also add in a little bit, just tiny little bits of either distortion or the bit 8 effect. And you can actually add kind of whatever you want, just tiny little bits of other things so that every time you drop on the compressor, it doesn't sound just like the Bitwig compressor on its own. So in this example, let's use the bit 8, and I'm actually going to solo out the bit 8 first and get a sound that I like. And maybe if I want to get fancy, I could add an LFO at the start here. So this video is suddenly now turning into something completely different, but that's okay. I'm going to now just subtly modulate this frequency ever so slightly. Okay, that's the one parameter I'm going to want to mess with. I'm going to turn this down really, really slow. Okay, so that's just going to add in a tiny, tiny bit of variation. And then I might add another LFO onto this jitter parameter. This one can be a little bit more extreme. And again, I'm going to actually turn this into time mode and bring this right down. Change the phase on it a little bit. And now let me just listen to this effect. Okay, cool. And now if I wanted to take this even a step further, I could actually EQ the bit 8. So I could go in here and I could drop in and EQ 5, for example. That actually sounds pretty cool. I don't know why I did that by default, but... So what I'm going for here is kind of just like a little bit of like a tape hiss sort of sound. So for right now, me actually make a little bit of a boost in one of these regions. Okay, so maybe something like that. I'm not going to really get bogged down in specifics. But now when I have this compressor working in here, I'm going to turn this wet mix way down. So now at least, along with the compressor, I'm also adding in a little bit of distortion, and I've EQ'd that distortion to give it some additional character. And you can take that as far as you want, but what I hope you've seen there is that it can take a lot of time, and every time you do this, it may not come out the way you would have liked. So oftentimes what I'll do if I'm not feeling incredibly inspired to tweak around and mess around for a few hours, which normally I'm willing to do, what I will end up doing instead is going in and using additional third-party plugins that can give me some character, something beyond just what it says on the label itself, beyond just compressor, beyond just EQ or whatever the case may be. So those are the plugins I'm going to show you here. They are as follows: the Klanghelm DC1A Effortless Character Compressor. And again, these are so easy, I'm not even going to go into a lot of depth on them, but the manual is 2 pages, so if you can't get through that manual, there is something maybe a little bit wrong with you. We're also going to possibly use this IVGI saturation and distortion effect. I like this one quite a bit. It sounds really nice, and it has few interesting parameters. And then we'll also maybe consider using the Tal-Tube. So this is like a tube amplifier emulation so that we can add a little bit of that tube distortion sound. It's something very difficult to do with the built-in distortion device with Bitwig. So I'll just show you guys these 3 and quickly talk about how they work, but they're all free, so you can download them and mess with them as much as you want. We'll just go through them in order, and what I want you to really listen for is how does this sound different from the Bitwig version of the particular effect, okay? So you can even go in and A/B, and a lot of times you're not going to use the third-party stuff. You can just use the Bitwig things. But when you want a little bit of that extra spice on top, this is a way to do it. So we'll start with the DC1A, the character compressor, and I'll just add in a couple of VU meters so that we can see what's happening. Just put these in order as they actually show up. Go into VU. Put that back to 0. Okay, all of that looks good to me. So this is a 2-knob compressor, meaning that if we want more compression, we're going to have to push the input. Okay, the harder we push the input, the more compression we're going to achieve, and we can actually see there's going to be a meter here showing us just how much gain reduction is happening. And then there are a few different knobs you can click. You can click deep if you want to try to keep the low end intact more. There's a relaxed version which kind of eases up on the amount of compression on the ratio. There's a dual mono, which is going to split out those stereo tracks, and so it's going to slightly sound differently. And then there's a negative mode, which is like just a completely different set of parameters, and it can actually give you kind of like a pumping type effect. So let's just hear and see what this does. So if I don't want this much gain reduction, I could pull the input back. Still going to have to increase the output though. Or if I want more, so this is where reading your meters and stuff becomes very important if you want to properly gain stage. So you have to look to the left, and then you'll have to look over here to the right to try to match these. And we can just listen to the different modes. and this is the one that's like going to be slamming it. So you can really hear how that negative one makes an impact. Again, you just have to mess around. You have to experiment and see what you can get out of it. But I'm hoping you are able to maybe subtly hear how this form of compression is a little bit different from what we have with the compressor device and from what we have with the dynamics device. If you're not hearing any kind of change or any kind of difference, don't worry about it. Just don't use it unless you can start to hear that change and start to understand what's happening. And that just takes time and practice. Next, we'll look at the IVG1 or IVGI maybe. And again, a very simple plugin. And for me, I like plugins that just have a few different knobs on them. So this one is also working based on the dynamic envelope of your audio signal. So the hotter your audio goes, the more this effect is going to be applied to it. All right, so we have a drive knob that's going to control just how much saturation is occurring. We have an output knob if we need to control that down. We also have a response. So where do we want to hype these particular additional frequencies that are being added, that saturation effect? We can do it all the way down the low, all the way up to the high. If we go way up to the high, it's going to sound more like a tape hiss, and down low, we're going to start to really hear some extra chunk and depth in the low end. And then we have this asymmetrical mix knob, which I'm not 100% what it does, but I can actually just go and check it real quick. This is why the manual is just so easy. Okay, 0 symmetric saturation, strong compressing character, 10 asymmetric saturation, more transparent character. All right, there you go. Easy enough, right? It's so simple that anybody could just go and read that. So let's hear how this is going to affect our signal. I'm going to set this to out. Oh yeah, you can really hear that. So again, the harder I drive it, the more I'm actually compressing it as well. So you can see that that dynamic range is really being choked when we drive this really hard, and we actually have to increase the output to try to get those gain stagings back to somewhat even. It's kind of ironic because with a lot of other drive and saturation-based plugins, the harder you drive it, the more you have to pull back on the output. So this one works a little bit differently. But just remember that what you're hearing isn't additional gain. It's just all of those extra harmonics coming into the spectrum. And we can look at that here quickly. All right, with it off. And with it on. So yeah, there's a whole lot of fun that can be had using this particular plugin as well. And last but not least, we have the Tal-Tube. Again, this is something that I've just found is kind of difficult to replicate inside of Bitwig using their built-in effects. It certainly is possible, but it does take a lot of time and it doesn't always work like right away. So what I'm going to do is just drop in the Tal-Tube. I've already made a preset that I like, or a default setting, so that I can have access to various macro controls. Okay, and here it is. Let's just take a listen to it. It's very, very simple. We have a couple of different modeling distortion devices here. We can set it into like a hard clip mode or just a little bit more gentle. If we just want the amp on, we can actually turn them both off. I tend to like it with the amp on. Okay, so we'll go to hard, and I just have to kind of reset this using these guys. Our dry wet control. All right, and then we have a drive control. And in this case, if I increase the drive, it's also going to increase levels. So by default, I've set this up to if I push the drive, the output is going to go down as well. And we have our gain control as well if we need to do any additional output setting. But I think I've got this in a pretty good place here. So let's just go ahead and see what this guy does. So to me, it's just another nice sounding distortion device that's very simple to use. You can dial it in quick. It's not going to work on every single piece of audio you have, but from time to time, I might go to that just to give myself a little bit of a respite from always having to go in and use either the distortion or the bit 8. All right, so I thought I would just go ahead and show you guys those. Again, not for everybody. You don't have to use them if you don't want, but I just want to keep everything transparent, and I want you guys to see that if I'm using something, then you can use it too. And, you know, there's no secrets between us. We're all friends. So thank you so much for watching. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how you might want to go about optimizing some of these simple third-party plugins. So you just have the consistency of control with these knobs. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Take care.